was one Air Force pilot. They said that he was having near-death experiences as he was witnessing the craft out of his body while he's behind the wheel and all the gears in the jet, out of his body. They said by the time he landed the jet, he got inside, he went to the bathroom, just sat on the toilet and held himself. And as he was holding his head, melting down mentally, he's now out of his body, staring at himself. To those who have interest in this, it's not a hobby. Especially if you're serious about the research. If you want to go to conferences, that's fine. And that's cool. I trust me, I've been there, right? Get a t-shirt, that's good. Do everything you're supposed to do, that's great. But if you want to separate yourself and actually really dive into this phenomenon, there are prices to be paid. The threat is assessed not by how the phenomenon treats people it likes. It's assessed by the way it treats the people it doesn't, by the negative accounts. That's what I'm highlighting. With respect to these people, the practitioners, if you will, number one, there's no way to vet who we're in contact with in terms of channeling. There's no way. Here's why I say that. Well, what they told me actually came true. It doesn't matter. We know they have foreknowledge. It does not mean it's who it's telling you it is. It's almost as if this intelligence, whereas in times past, this intelligence could commandeer players within the game. Oh, I'm Uncle Rita. I'm Aunt Rita, Uncle Bob. Yeah, it could do that. And there were times where we could vet, is that really Aunt Rita? Why? Well, Aunt Rita didn't like football, but you're acting as if she did, right? Or yeah, if you were really a demon, you would know Gematria. You'd have knowledge of that somewhere. You'd at least know, okay, what you're doing. I mean, you're professing to know it. 666. No. And so there were ways where we had ability. We go, okay, yeah, well, that doesn't make sense. That it doesn't, because we have the historical record. But that has only occurred when this intelligence would manifest as players already in the game. With those players come characteristics. With those characteristics come rules, behavioral patterns, methodologies that accompany the archetype and mask it wears. But now the phenomenon has created its own character in the game, one at which we can no longer vet, and that is the ET. And yet it's coming as the same, we use the same methodologies. Pull up a Ouija board. Contact ETs. Why? Again, so it's stepping into everything. And so now what we're dealing with, when it comes, okay, I'm contacting extraterrestrials. There's no way. It figured it out. Okay? It co-evolved with us. There's no way we can vet that. So literally what I'm suggesting is this intelligence, yeah, it had this archetype and this player and this mask. All of those can be vetted compared to the historical record we have in antiquity. Now it realized I can create my own. I can literally fabricate my own history. And the only thing that I have to do is use nebulous, ambiguous terms like will raise your consciousness. It's enigmatic because, again, how do we vet them? Well, they tell me something and it comes true. Okay, that's fine. That's just foreknowledge. That doesn't speak to their nature, their origin, and what they want to do with that individual. Now, in a sense, it is creating profits out of people. Where did we first see that? Well, again, what are we dealing with? I'll tell you what raises red flags with me personally is when we start seeing experiencers wanting to be mediators between us and them. How many times have you seen on Twitter, you'll go Twitter, my beings don't do that. My aliens, right. You don't own them. You don't name them. No. Right? Matter of fact, you don't tell them when they're going to manifest. They tell you when to come. Come here, do this, do that. So this ownership is a byproduct of the symbiotic relationship. And the causally, again, they threw this out there. Yes, under the illusion of control. And this is, again, now we're dealing with the parasitic nature of conjuring to be conjured. The illusion of control. Let me say it like this. We're dealing with aspects of biology where this kind of intelligence has manifested. The closest thing I've come to see is called the Iranian spider-tailed viper. You know what that guy did? It co-evolved with its prey. It's going to blow your mind. Co-evolved with its prey. So much so that while all of the other snakes are trying to strangle their prey, they're hunting day and night, they're looking everywhere. I'm hungry, I got to go do this, got to do that. And so whereas others would go to the prey, this intelligence realized that the best way to capture my prey is to appear as what my prey was wanting to capture. And so throughout history, you see its evolution as it created the symbiotic relationship. Its main predator, or main prey rather, as a predator, was birds. It loved birds. What do birds eat? They eat spiders. And so at the tip of its tail, you see it like a spider. And what this intelligence does is it teaches us about what a real predator means to our species. Now, what it will do is it will hide behind a bush, and at the height of the evening sun, will take his tail and begin to demonstrate behavioral patterns of a spider. That's the mask. And so the bird, right, microscopic, nearly microscopic view, sees it and thinks spider, and then heaps upon that spider, right, what? Rules, behavioral patterns. Watch this. Limitations. That thing can't fly. I can. And so during this cognitive interface, gentlemen, this bird thinks that it is hunting the spider, not realizing that it's the one being hunted by the snake. And the illusion of control is employed. I'm conjuring them. We're the ones being conjured. And by the time that bird realizes that behind that mask of the spider, there's a proto-intelligence. And when it manifests, only then, when it makes eye contact for a fleeting moment, then that bird realizes, I don't have any rules for that thing.
As above, so below. Damn, that's quite an analogy.
I mean, if you were to give, because there's going to be people that are going to watch this video that haven't give this whole topic much thought. Well, I mean, and so like I could get advice is good, we could take it or we could leave it. For those that are just getting interested in the paranormal, the UFO phenomena, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, knowing what you just said, which resounds, I mean, it sounds like absolute to me, as far as the prey and adapting with it. Is it better for people to just not pay attention to this subject? Or are they just kind of like, would they just be cattle in a field that don't know why they're there until it's too late? Or is it better that we get the real truth of the matter out there, which is, I'm sure, why you speak about this stuff. I mean, obviously, so that we can all become aware, so we can get rid of that symbiotic relationship and be free from the imprisonment and the manipulation of this energy, this source, this evil.
Well, I think there has to be a generation that takes the reins. We have to have more Dr. Carla Turners. We have to have more Steve Maras. We have to have more Barry Fitzgeralds. Okay? More Jacques Vallées. And we can't have the knowledge that they have amassed by virtue of literally sacrificing Dr. Carla Turner, sacrificing her life.
Yes.
They told her, we're going to take you out.
Yeah.
We can't afford to let that die. And so to those who have interest in this, it's not a hobby, especially if you're serious about the research. If you want to go to conferences, that's fine, and that's cool. I trust me, I've been there, right? Get a t-shirt. That's good. Do everything you're supposed to do. That's great. But if you want to separate yourself and actually really dive into this phenomenon, there are prices to be paid. And, if you take it seriously, they're going to take you seriously. So my suggestion would be, if it's a hobby, yeah, okay, whatever. But if you want it to be more of a hobby and you're willing to put in the work, willing to be a voice, just know that there could be a price paid. I mean, my God, we're looking at just various John Mack. You know how many other John Macks died that night within just the city limits? Multiple, targeted, targeted, targeted. I mean, Ted Rice's grandmother, during the abduction, they were trying to do things to him. She stepped in between them, and they told her, "We just put something in your head. You're going to die for that."
Yeah, it's not all alien antennas, on your head and a little
Yeah.
like hair clip. It's not, hey, I went to
Yeah.
Roswell and got myself an inflatable gray alien. It's, it's hardcore stuff, and it
Yeah.
needs to be taken seriously. I mean, whether there's positive and negative, or just positive, or all negative, it needs to be taken seriously, people. I mean, this is not
Yeah.
just some sweeping fad. This is the history of humanity that we're talking about here. And it is vitally important. And Mr. Gillis, you named off some great names: Carla Turner, John Mack. I consider you as part of as part of that group. I mean, you're trying to bring
Wow.
wisdom and thought and critical thought, which is important, into
Yeah.
the subject, and looking at it with, as George said, without the rose colored glasses,
Right.
and acknowledging what it could possibly, if very well, might be. And
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we had you on here, is because unfortunately there's not going to be many sources that we can hear this from, and
Well,
so
they're out there. They've signed
they are.
NDAs, and they'll share it with people, and the people they share it with, they take their word for it. And it's like, okay, there's something wrong with our models. And if in fact we are dealing with an intelligence that by virtue of diversification, we have 1,000 different birds looking at 1,000 different spiders, thinking this will work, that'll work, this will work, that'll work. And because we are under the illusion of control, they won't do that to me. That we've got, I don't want to keep rambling, but what that implies, though, is that whatever we're dealing with is in control of something. And I think the government knows that. I think that's why Lou Elizondo, I know people have their reservations, but he said if we knew, it'd be somber.
Mr. Gillis, what do you make of these secondary effects of people who have experiences directly with the phenomena, and then maybe after some time has passed, these experiencers, they claim to have downloads, they claim to have PK abilities, they claim to have channeling abilities. What do you make of these secondary effects?
We are led to believe that's us. That's the lie. We are led to believe it's us, right? We're the ones doing that. It's our gift. I don't believe that. I believe we're dealing with remnants of this intelligence. And not to say that people don't have gifts, but when you're dealing with an experiencer that had no manifestations, nothing, and all of a sudden they're, oh, wow, that's us. There are two possibilities. One that I've hypothesized with Dr. Barry Fitzgerald as well. He believes this too, where sometimes it's by the virtue of when the soul is taken, and the soul knows this. And so when it's put back into the body, the brain itself starts to pick up on what the soul, right, is interpreting. That's one possibility. The other possibility is exactly what I said. It's not us, it's them. Again, if we look in the 16th century, when these beings were, conducting their research and monitoring fertility and abducting women, right? When they were implanting their consciousness into the experiencers themselves thought, this is my thought. This is what I'm feeling. And it wasn't. Matter of fact, I had a case years ago of, it was a young man. It was about an hour and a half away from me. And the mother wanted me to come in and do a cleansing and everything. And I don't do them now, but back then I did. And so I was like, well, it's an hour and a half. I'm not going to charge you. I'm paying for the gas. It's my time. I said, so just promise me that if and when I get there, you're going to allow me to do my investigation. And, whatever, you won't get my way or anything. I said, so, do you want this entity inside of you to leave? You know what he told me? No. I said, why? He said, because it shows me things about people I didn't know before. What's the difference? One is interpreting that intelligence as separate. The other is thinking, it's me. I'm the gifted one.
Well, some parasites boost up the strength of animals that it feeds on. You know, I mean, parasites will do that. Yeah.
Right.
So, Chris.
That's what I think is happening. You're right, but yeah, that's what I think is happening, is that we confuse that. That's me doing that. I don't think it is.
I just wanted to ask, because it seems like for something to be so parasitic, it would want to keep that parasitic state for as long as possible. With this increase in curiosity, and now it's like I was saying before, it's in the mainstream now. We're talking about people want disclosure and all of this. What do you think? And I know we're hypothesizing, but what do you think is going to happen? Because it almost feels like we're on the cusp, or almost on the cusp, maybe, of some kind of curtain opening up, some kind of revealing of something. And it could be, it's, we're hypothesizing, so you can say whatever you think. I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, if our model of the phenomenon is wrong, then our timeline is equally as wrong. If we look at the behavioral patterns demonstrated by the phenomenon itself, then we look at, okay, the possibility of the impartation of technology merely being them giving us what we want. It's not that, okay, they're super no, maybe it's literally just, okay, here's this. That's what you appear to want. Just manifest it to you. Here you go. What does it want? What does it want from us? And so if our model of the phenomenon is far more scientific than it should be, and if we ignore the fact that, yes, the emergence of altars, then they manifested technology to self-replicate through us, then they were not seeding us with technology. They were seeding us with ritual magic. That, my friends, is interesting. Number one. Number two, if that is, in fact, the correct model, the primary source, the preferred method of contact, if that's the model, then our timeline could be that disclosure within the framework of what we want it to be will never happen. Punching through the clouds, or the government officials saying, hey, listen, yeah, they're ETs. Disclosure could have happened. The emergence of the first altars. We just didn't realize it. We didn't realize that was the correct model. Now, going even deeper, if in fact there is one known origin of this intelligence, the government knows that, and if it comes out and suggests that it's a completely different origin, that's not disclosure. Now, the problem, though, is this. If they go out and suggest, yes, there are beings that are flying around, and we do not have, we cannot dominate our own airspace, that's a problem. But it's even worse to admit they exist. And in admitting they exist, you admit there are entities inside of them. Because when that happens, you're going to see the poo hit the fan, because you're going to see millions of people who are going to say, hey, listen, Doc, I had a dream I was on one of those crafts. I never, ever admitted it because I always believed I was crazy. But by legitimizing their presence as a craft, you're also legitimizing their presence as occupants. And those occupants don't always tickle you behind the ears. Sometimes they take people out of bodies. And so the one person, I think it was Tim Burchett recently, I may be wrong, but it was one of the representatives, came out and said that he was told, this is just yesterday, I think it was, that if disclosure actually occurred, there would be riots in the streets, anarchy.
Yeah, it was Tim.
Why would that occur? What's going on here? Why would the government obfuscate this information for 50 plus years? It bugs me, because again, that would be them legitimizing that. Forget about airspace, inner space. And that's why I would suggest that they're interdimensional, coming to us through us. In other words, like you said earlier, right? Where the cognitive interfaces that they employ often come from belief systems. Right. And that's what they pander to.
It's a jumbled mess that we've gotten ourselves into. That's for sure. Because you're bringing this stuff up, and I'm like, well, of course, the government everybody says the government. The ones that actually know what's going on, they have their altars, and their altars is the power, which is the technology or whatever else they think, and they somehow think that they're in control of it, right? So they're not going to want to go ahead and have the rest of, you, me, and everybody in society, and that's not just the US, this is worldwide, okay, realizing that, hey, this stuff's going on. So they want to hold on to their power on their altars, right? And then, of course, the entity, the presence itself, is going to, of course, want to hold on to its true power. So it's going to make sure that none of this stuff comes really to fruition anyway. And then, but, you've got this whole battle between, it's really, again, it's up to us.
Mr. Gillis, you talked about legitimizing it. If the government were to disclose and legitimize that there are these technical craft and there's these beings and people attest to being abducted, what are these agreements that Grush is alluding to?
My God, what would we do if they didn't honor their end? What could we do? You know what I mean? Think about that. We have a pilot. There was one Air Force pilot that I recently listened to one of his interviews, and he said that he was having near-death experiences as he was witnessing the crash out of his body while he's behind the wheel and all the gears in the jet, out of his body. And he said by the time he landed the jet, he got inside, he went to the bathroom, just sat on the toilet and held himself. And as he was holding his head, melting down mentally, he's now out of his body, staring at himself. This is, again, aliens, okay. Another thing is this, UFO. Well, spirits don't have bodies. Okay, that's like consciousness doesn't have bodies either, but it does. If we're looking at a species that does self-replicate, yes, we're looking at hardware and software. To say that software is not hardware doesn't mean software cannot find hardware. To me, it's like, okay, well, duh. You know what I mean? It's like, wait a minute, like that's a really lazy answer. But that's just one of my but anyways, dealing with Grush's testimony, there are two things that it reminds me of. Number one, where the alleged bodies of the NHIs were taken after Roswell. Okay, right, Pat Air Force Base, 10 minutes away from me, matter of fact. You know where the Collins Elite was hubbed out of, right, Pat Air Force Base. And during their research of looking at the various intersectionalities between the occult and this intelligence, they uncovered a faction within our government who were actually in contact with them. That's when all their red flags went up. Wait a minute, where is our technology coming from? Not all of it, but some of it. Yes. And so basically they were performing what's called the Parsons technique, chaos magic, sex magic. And in one program, they alleged that there were actual sacrifices taking place. And in those interfaces, the phenomenon would partially manifest metallic objects. And upon the manifestation, it would take place, and then for a few seconds, partially manifested, they would grab pieces of it, and then they would reverse engineer that, or literally make an agreement with people like Lockheed Martin or Skunk Works or something, whatever, and then sell that off, or whatever, give them portions of that technology, and we'd reverse engineer it and all that stuff. And those were the kinds of, it was weird. I can't speak to the exact agreements, but I can tell you what the Collins Elite realized was that this entire time they were being punked, where quite literally these people were conjuring beings by virtue of Crowleyan magic and by the Parsons technique. And when they would interface with this intelligence, that there were certain times when the phenomenon would not play by any known rules. What does that mean? Right? Well, if I conjure it, it can only go this far, or it won't hurt me. And they realized it wasn't true. And to a point, they were, like I said before, earlier in the show, where they were under the illusion of control. And then out of nowhere, the phenomenon would break the bond. And now it's okay. Matter of fact, their one of their conclusions was simply, we hope that they would pity us enough to give us technology we can use against them. That ought to tell you where we're at.
Slave wanting to become the master. That's what it is. It's this constant back and forth pull, where the master knows, well, this my slave is trying to control me. But if they give too much, that slave will. And
Yeah.
so humanity being the slave, master being the parasitic, nature, whatever have of the entity beings. And so like there's this constant respectful tug of war I can see at these altars during these conjuring and these exchanges of this technology and all that stuff. And every time we try to set the rule for the master says nope and pulls out because there's a danger there. If we end up
Yeah.
becoming the master, and they're not going to want that. So I mean
Right.
that's where the rug gets pulled.
Right.
And I'm just kind of curious when it comes to, because you have all these different cultures, not to go back too far, but we got all these different cultures that see the aliens or the ETs differently. Like Japan won't see as many gray aliens as the US will have. It's very cultural, and I think that
Yeah.
just goes as it bolsters your theories on that, and Jacques Vallée and
Yeah.
others. I'm just wondering if they actually have a true appearance.
Don't
I
know.
mean, that's a question that none of us can answer, and I wasn't putting that out there to answer. But I am kind of curious. I've been contemplating the gray visage, the gray
Mhm.
alien that is now starting to have more popularity, even in countries that abductees say they really haven't seen them before. And they're very mannequin-like. They're very expressionless. They're very just blank. And I'm
Yeah.
curious if that is because that's the palette, the original palette they have. And because a lot of people aren't falling into religion as much as they used to, and there's not as much, there's more cultural merging, that it's actually led to less specific cultures and beliefs, that we're actually limiting them in what their appearances can be like. And we're
Right.
now starting to see more of the blank slate. Like
Yeah.
they're kind of depending on us, and they're like, well, give me something. And we're like, I don't know, you're just a gray alien. And in that way, I think that might be confusing them, because like you said, that the girl, she grew up, it was a and it was a cartoon character, and then when she got older, she didn't believe that anymore, and the entity looked confused, and its eyes moved, and it started shifting and changing. And I'm wondering if that's why we're getting more reports of grays. I mean, it's just a hypothesis. I got nothing to
Oh
back that up.
no, I think it's brilliant. But this is not the first time we've seen that.
Mhm.
My mind goes back to what are called eye idols in Göbekli Tepe. This is fascinating. In Göbekli Tepe, archaeologists uncovered a series of idols molded by the hands of men. And these idols were allegedly worshipped as divinized ancestors. But they had no ears and no mouths. The reason they believed that is because the way they communicated, they didn't have to use ears and mouths. They used their eyes. Where have we seen that? So again, yes, this implies, I mean, if we're going to go down the rabbit hole of cognitive interfaces, yes, that would mean that the phenomenon created its own character in its own game. It self-realized, it edited, and it created its own space within its own framework and stepped into it. And now, again, we don't really know what it is. I mean, because it's quite possible we are birds hunting for spiders. Not again, right? We're looking for spiders. The phenomenon's looking for birds. And what we're doing, this is what bugs me about a lot. Well, you can manipulate your consciousness. But what if consciousness is not the driver? What if consciousness is the vehicle? The case study I had in my own life, man, when I went to bed one night, I was working at a factory many years ago, went to bed instantly in a dream. And I told you about this, John, on Facebook, where in this dream, there's this entity. It was a featureless shadow figure, but it looked like my ex, or now my ex, but then my fiance. If you took her in the room, turn the lights off, you could see her long hair. You just couldn't see anything, this way. So anyways, it's straddling me and it's leaning into me like that. And in the nightmare, I'm freaking out because like you said, John, this is not a normal dream. There's something present here. And so I'm flailing my arms, and finally I wake myself up. And to my utter astonishment, the entity was actually on top of me. How can it be present when I'm awake and present in my nightmare? which again, now we're dealing with really hypothesizing here. Is consciousness the driver, or is it merely the vehicle to which they manifest? Might I suggest one of the experiencers, I'll shut up in a second, I'll be quiet in a second, but one of the experiencers Dr. Carter Turner was working with was told, you got to realize that we are a species within. What do you mean? It's our soul, but it's your body.
I asked Daniel, this was months ago, I said, we keep wondering what they're doing to our consciousness. But what I find really fascinating is what they might be doing to our subconscious.
There we go.
And that they are traveling on a boat through the river of our subconscious and doing whatever they could possibly want to. And we would have no idea otherwise. So, yeah, thank you for saying that. That just like, bam, just to like hit me in the head like a mallet,
Right. Coming to us or through us. And I'll let you speak. Sorry about that, man. I have ADHD when I gotta finish a thought because I'll lose it.
You're the guest.
You're good.
Right. But coming to us or through us, is that the nature of the symbiotic relation? Is that why when we're 2 steps ahead, it's 2 steps ahead of us? Why? Because it's an extension of us. Now, this is it's of us, but it's in us, but it's not of us. In other words, it's evolving next to us, but that is not who we are. Now, this gets back into them looking at us as mere containers for their consciousness. Now, that would seem to be an alien motif unless you went to demonology and you realize that was possession to us as pregnancy to them. And that's how they've self-replicated. And this is also why I get it's so burdensome. Well, if there's such a threat, why wouldn't they kill us? Okay, time out. Again, we've got to call it out. We can't say, okay, it's a good theory. It's not a good theory. Because if you look at the parasitic model I have been using as of late and talking about in my interviews, yes, they use us to self-replicate. But they are not us, but they need us to become them. That would imply that, of course, to end us would have an existential effect on them. So, are they a threat to us? Yes. But it doesn't mean they're going to wipe us out. Why? Because, and the gentleman mentioned it earlier, of course, the nature of the parasitic model is keep this one alive till it absolutely dies. And then what did the mage do? Take his consciousness, dispossess one body, possess another. And this was, my God, look at a Rendlesham Forest case study, okay? Peter Robbins talked about this in a lecture years ago. In it, he said that in the Rendlesham Forest, like when the phenomenon or the UFO manifested, that there was one of the experiencers was watching the creatures on the ground floor. In that when one looked this way, they all did. When one looked up, matter of fact, when they left, they all looked up at the same time. Why? Because if we're dealing with consciousness and biological avatars, you can have 7 different avatars with one consciousness. That is necronetics. And in necronetics, again, I was searching for vocabulary that could even encroach on what we're describing as the self-replication of species. But that's the closest I've been able to get. And that's why I'm going to publish my work with respect to that model. Of course, they're not killing us.
It's a metal term. It's so cool.
Yeah, I'm trademarking it because I'm thinking like James Bond movie will come out like, welcome to necronetics,
Yes.
Mr. Bond. I'm like, got it, that's mine. You know what I mean? It's mine. No. But it's unique.
Now on the next episode of Necro.
Oh my God. Yeah, but I think that's what they're doing. And I think religion has monopolized possession just as ufology has monopolized the hybridization program. No, that's gatekeeping. They're present. And we have case studies in history where both present in the same body. That is disturbing, where the phenomenon took both.
Are there any countermeasures that you have gleaned or discovered as a demonologist, as a researcher of this dark kind of field? Like I notice you're wearing a bead necklace, right?
Yeah, this is not an amulet. I just like it. And I don't wear black because I'm a demonologist. I just love black.
Hey.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
That's it.
right.
There you
You're
go.
Honestly. Right. I mean, I do. I honestly do. And I
Yeah.
was wearing black before I ever got in this field. If I had the money, I would have literally nothing but monochrome black outfits. Nothing.
Hell
It would
yeah.
be a variation of this, but you know what I mean? Let me say this. The earliest amulet we know of with respect to the missing fetus syndrome, at least, was written by mothers who were being visited by Lamashtu. And what would occur is that they would be pregnant and they would be asleep at night. And in the dream state, a being would descend down upon them, stare into their eyes as they're sleeping. And so the next morning they would wake up, baby's gone. And so what they began to do is with iron, they would construct facsimiles. And one was like a necklace where they would make another face, or what could be, right, as the primordial way they would do it, but a face, another face. So hoping that while they're asleep, the being would confuse which face, right, look at the wrong face, which means they would keep their baby. So iron does seem to work sometimes. That's all I could suggest. I would suggest amulets, but sometimes that doesn't work, right? And so I have to look at percentages. What works most of the time? Iron.
Well, and that's also something that a lot of people would say works against Fae and other creatures like that.
Yep. True. Yeah, it's universal, which would imply what?
No, get out of here. Come on.
Right?
let's keep it all, separated. All these fields of study, they have nothing to do with each other,
yeah.
and one of us is going to find the answer, but it's going to be us, and it's not going to be any of you guys, which sounds a lot like religion, which I'm sure that that this religion was devised and given to us by the parasitic entities. I would gather. I mean,
Well, that's
makes sense
interesting.
to me.
Yeah.
Keep us in control.
Right. Giving us spider rules.
Yep, that's right. Spider rules.
The Collins elite, again, they said that not only were the same signatures and set of anomalies present in both, but specifically speaking, that within the magic and the incantations performed, it was only connected to hurting someone or negatively affecting someone else. Well, if it's such a threat, why wouldn't it negatively, curse the soil? No, that's not the point. We're still working on old models. It was present in both. So they know this. They know this. And what it leads me to believe is, yes, we have people out there selling merch and conferences and everything's good, gung-ho, contact. Yeah, it's fine. But here's where we're at. We don't really know what they believe, because they could very well have been purchased by conglomerates. Give me your voice. I'll finance your research. And let me tell you guys something. As a researcher, there's nothing better than having someone who says, look, we'll buy your books.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what you want. So, I mean, I get it. I mean, I don't get it, but you know what I mean? It is beneficial, but like, look, because I'm self-funded. It's cool. No big deal. But yeah, it'd be a lot easier, right? Hey, I mean, it is. There's some people I could see them doing that. There are some people that would buy into that, right?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll say whatever you want me to say. At the end of the day, I'll know the truth, which is what I'm after. And so it's a hairy situation. Do you trust? I don't know who to trust. I know the handful of people that I've built relationships with. I believe in them. They believe in me, and we're pursuing the same research, some of us. That's all I need. Let everybody else do their things.
Really quick, Nathaniel, can you talk about Jack Parsons and what he wrote in his diary, and at what cost did this communication with these interdimensional entities?
So,
what is the trade-off that Jack Parsons articulated in his private journal?
In the middle of the Collins Elite research, they were obviously looking back at Jack Parsons, the way he was conjuring this intelligence and gaining access to technologies. In his diary, he wrote that he feared that one day they would take his soul, and that at the very matter of fact, it was in one of his rituals. and because he would do the ritual, and then he would do experiments with science, the scientific method. Well, in one of which, I think it was one of those, exploded, and they had pieces of him. And so it was at that moment that the Collins elite was formed, because then you have Kenneth Arnold's, right? What is that? Oh, okay. And if you read the transcripts of his testimony, he said he believed he was looking at something that had to do with the afterlife. Which, mind you, this is where the Collins elite were. I mean, at the very conclusion, one of their conclusions, rather, was that whatever we're dealing with was kind of demonic. That's the only term they would use, but they were liminal. They were wherever the afterlife is. That they believed that's where they were. So when I talk to other researchers who are evangelical, when they use something, I'll tell you what's crazy. A lot of them don't even know the Collins elite. I promise you, that blew my mind. I'm thinking, what? Yeah, they don't know, or else they'd be teaching at their conferences. You know what I mean? They would be out there everywhere. Can you imagine that? Thousands of Christians. Hey, listen, here it is. I mean, dude. So I'm telling you, if they knew this, they would be, talking about it. But again, when they're saying it's demonic, when you look at the model the Collins elite were employing in the terminologies, it didn't even fit the evangelical model of demonic. It was just a working title because they too lack the correct vocabulary. What kind of demons are performing magic? Doesn't make sense. We believe practitioners practiced, right? Obviously, that's what they're called, practitioners. They were the ones doing this. And yet these beings seemed to be employing them as well. Which means, again, this gets back to the remote viewer. If we're performing these amulets and using them, applying them to influence them to come down here, and their magic and sorcery is alien to us, then who are they trying to influence? That widens the gap and opens a dimension to us that they're operating off of. Those are the rules they're playing by. And they're playing by different rules because they're playing a different game.
Now, Mr. Gillis, Daniel is a remote viewer, and he has experience with this type of
okay, I'll log
ability.
off.
See you, Daniel. All right, no, I'm kidding.
But Daniel, can you talk to Mr. Gillis about this remote viewing ability that you have, and perhaps he can give some kind of contextual explanation as to what might be going on?
This stuff very much works out of that liminal space, that whatever multi-dimensions they are coming from, that is definitely where a lot of this is. I'm on the framework of, I'm not sure if all of the NHIR groups could be fully physical. I don't fully know, but I find it very fascinating because I've had personal experiences in all these areas. Out of that experience, it's been positive, at least so far, and I've found merits of it that had made me more patient with my own kids, with myself, of trying to do healing and internally and stuff. So, I would like to preface that, but I think this is why it's so paramount for people like you or others to be able to do this research in your field of bringing all this information, so that different people like to have different experiences. Like I have remote viewing, other people are full channelers or other things, but being able to bring all this information together in all of our fields, that we're able to then have more of a data set to be able to unpack, especially moving forward in the future. And also, so Chase Williams,
Chase is my dude.
Yeah, I talk with him regularly. We all know him as well, and fantastic guy. But what he's doing with his own, trying to work on his project of getting all this going. I think it's super paramount for us to be able to progress this and whatever conclusion we arrive to.
I know Chase real quick. I used to do shows with him when he was on with Jeff Kingsbury way back in the day, man. Yeah, it was like my very first ufological show ever.
That's cool.
So Chase and I differ on some things about the research, but dude, great freaking guy. Love Chase to death. Hello, Chase, miss you, buddy. But that was all I was gonna say. To your point, the thing is, Yeah, definitely. Thing is, man, I don't know. I could tell you my stuff too. Like, I don't know. I mean, when I was doing cleansings, I would be in 2 places at once. I got a phone call. This is crazy. I mean, yeah, where somebody saw me in Rhode Island at a beach. I was in my living room watching a movie with my dad. I smelled the beach. It's like I just ate pizza. So I told my dad, I said, I feel like I'm, at the time, my ex. I think I'm with my ex right now. She's in Rhode Island. That's weird. 2 hours later, I get a phone call from her best friend. Are you in town? No. Why? And then she told a story. Whatever you're doing, stop. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I'm in my living room, man. What are you talking about? This is weird. Very strange. So I've had weird experiences too. The thing is, we don't know who's guiding that. I mean, we don't. And that's the troubling aspect of it. Some of what Jack Parsons and Aleister Crowley were doing is they were performing rituals that came from a guy named Eliphas Levi, who got his rituals from Brahma the Mage. But Brahma the Mage said, okay, look, in order for these rituals and the phonetic renderings of these rituals to be successful, you have to have a fear of God. You have to live a godly life, because this guy was a Jewish mystic, Brahma the Mage. So that when you perform these rituals, if you don't have that tradition as a foundation from which these incantations come out of you, they will be unsuccessful. Here comes Crowley and Parsons. By virtue of what Bromlin the Mage said and the way he constructed some of these incantations, they should have not been answered at all. And so, like a probe, they're out in the dark, shivering abyss, uttering, and then something out there made eye contact. Why did you come knocking on my door? No. Why did you build a door to begin with? It's an access point. There's a spark in the shadows. What is that? And now it's like, okay, whatever we're dealing with.
Regardless on one's own personal stance on the topics which we discussed, I believe it's highly important that we take away the self-imposed blinders from our vision in perceiving the phenomena or phenomenon and consider all potential aspects. Could you tell the viewers and listeners where they can find more about you?
Yeah, so I'm working on a website, and you guys will get that whenever I publish it out to everyone. But you can follow me on Instagram, and I don't have Twitter, much less UFO Twitter. You can find me on my YouTube channel. I have a playlist where all of my guest appearances, including this one, will be added to it. So I think we're up. Just the ones that are published on YouTube, I think it's over 100.
Nice.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Other than that, I'm working on necronetics still. I'm trademarking that because it's for the sake of other researchers that are going to be coming around, right? Who are also going to be looking for linguistic prowess, to where I could say this is actually what you're researching, believe it or not, or at least you can identify underneath that linguistic umbrella. So, other than that, tomorrow I don't know if I think we're going to be live. I'm going to be with Ted Rice and Stuart Eggleton, I believe is his name, and on Alien Talk. That'll be interesting.
You're also writing a book titled The Skin That Crawls, which is available for pre-order. I know that I have pre-ordered myself my copy, and I'm waiting in anticipation for it to get finished. No rush, but I'm just waiting in anticipation so I can put it next to John Mack and Jacques Vallée. And yes,
not a streamer, by the way. I love those guys.
And you'll fit in there wonderfully. So thank you, Mr. Gillis. Privilege of speaking with you today, and it really has been an honor. And I hope that we can talk again in the future. And I suggest that everyone keeps themselves updated on your work.
Right,
it's
that'd
highly
be awesome.
important.
Thank you. I appreciate it, brother. Thank you for having me on, and not blacklisting me.
No, never. You're welcome to come back at any time. I do hope that we speak again.
All right, thank you.
Everybody, if you like this video, which you better, you're gonna like, subscribe, follow Mr. Gillis. You won't be disappointed. Thank you, everyone. To my co-hosts, Mr. Gillis. Have a wonderful evening.